Hi there everyone, it's Russell from the Reading Fabricator, and today I'm going to share with you 10 novellas, novels, just any book that's under 200 pages that I think you should read. A few of these I haven't read for many years, but this year I've pretty much dedicated at least 60% of all books to being under that 200 page mark. They're quick, they're fast, I'm able to get through them, and I thought I want to share them with you. So let's begin. The first one is this wonderful book right here, Trout Fishing in America by Richard Brautigan. Now, I first came upon this, actually, my roommate, he bought this book, and I looked at it and went, nah, it doesn't look like the sort of thing I would read. But then, a few months back, I watched a video from Noah on Everyone Who Reads It Must Converse, and him and a couple of guests, one in particular by the name of Quentin from Egypt Reads and Rambles. That's how I was introduced to him, and I was able to find his booktube channel. And he's done a fair few videos on Richard Brautigan, just on different novels and all that sort of thing. And I thought I'd give it a shot, and I read it. I'm no expert on his work, and I didn't do a video on this because I just did not know what to think of it. This is one of those books where I had to just sit on it, just rest and think about it, because it was just so different from anything I've ever read. And you know, when I first started reading, I thought, okay, Trout Fishing in America is maybe just a magazine publication and people are referring to it. But then it keeps changing. Trout Fishing in America could be anything. That's the great thing about this book. One of my all-time favorite sections in the book is a group of students who, you know, chalk trout fishing in America on the backs of younger students. And yeah, it's just a slogan of different, it can mean anything, trout fishing in America. And I really liked it. It sort of showed all parts of America. A wonderful read. A very tragic life, obviously, Richard Brautigan. But if you were to do your research on him, then I'd suggest checking out Quentin's videos over at Egypt Reads and Rambles. I'll post a link in the description box, because I think he's the forerunner for this sort of thing. He's got a lot of good videos out there, so do check him out. So that is Trout Fishing in America. The next one is one of my favorite Bret Easton Ellis books. It was the first one I ever read by him, and that was Less Than Zero. I rated the sequel Imperial Bedrooms, and yeah, I hated it. I didn't think it was that good. I've been meaning to get back to it and reread it, because maybe I just was having a bad day when I read it. And it's a very quick read. You could read that in a few hours if you wanted to. This one's a little bit longer, just shy of 200 pages. It's all about the hedonism of college life, and it involves the character Clay coming back to Los Angeles. And what's really striking is that this book was written while Bret Easton Ellis was in college himself. I mean, he published this when he was 21, and there are passages in this thing where I'm like, holy shit, this is actually pretty good writing. So, you know, Bret Easton Ellis was off to a flying start, and I'm a huge fan of a lot of his work. In particular, one from 2005 by the name of Luna Park, which is very meta. It involves the character of Bret Easton Ellis, and I do recommend that to anyone out there reading it, although I wouldn't recommend that as the first book by him. I'd still recommend this as the first Bret Easton Ellis book you should read to get into his work. Rules of Attraction is pretty good, and I do like American Psycho, but that's not the one I recommend to most people. But this is just full of drug-fueled parties. It's full of very taboo subjects. There's a snuff film going on as well, and a dead body that they find in an alleyway. And it shows pretty much, it de-glamorizes the whole lifestyle of those in the 80s. Very good stuff. I really like this one. It's a definite cult classic, but yeah, I recommend it. Less Than Zero. This one here originally wasn't going to be in my list, but I did a reread about a month or so ago, and it jumped up in my rating. It went from a 3-star to a 4-star read. That is Heart of Darkness by Joseph Conrad. I read it quite early on, maybe 5 years ago, and I didn't really care for it. I mean, I appreciated what it was going for, but the writing just seemed very, yeah, it just wasn't my thing. So when I did that reread and read it in pretty much one sitting, I was absolutely taken by it. I think it's a really a disturbing cautionary tale of just colonialism and just going into that proverbial heart of darkness in the middle of the Congo. The character of Kurtz in particular is a very fascinating character, and I'm staggered by just how good the writing in this. I mean, I look back to my earlier self when I was reading it and hating it and thinking, what was wrong with you? Because there's some wonderful sentences in this, great descriptive sentences. Joseph Conrad is a damn fine writer. Very good. And I've always been meaning to read his other work, but I haven't. So this still remains the only book by him that I have read. But if you ever read Joseph Conrad, then let me know of some other books that you might think are on par, if not better than Heart of Darkness. because I'm curious to read some more by him. Okay, we've got a little bit of Southern Gothic for you. Wise Blood, Flannery O'Connor. My first book by her. I've still yet to track down The Violet Bear It Away. That's a very hard book to find in Australia. But I was very pleased when I picked this baby up. I mean, I jumped on it immediately and I read it and really enjoyed it. It's very it's got a lot to say about a religion in the South, and I think Flannery O'Connor is a very fascinating writer. Her short stories are immaculate. The tale of Hazel Motes, who comes out of the armed services and goes to the city and starts his own sort of personal religion, which obviously goes nowhere. He's not very good at it. But just seeing his downfall, it's really gripping stuff, absolutely gripping. And the little short story in there of the secondary character, I can't remember his name, but the one who ends up stealing a gorilla suit and dressing up as a gorilla, which itself is its own short story. That's good stuff as well. And I came upon Flannery O'Connor through the BookTube channel. Everyone who reads it must converse. Noah, it seems to be the guy to go to when it comes to her works. He's got an array of videos and Instagram posts dedicated to her, so do check his stuff out. He's absolutely brilliant. So he put me on to Flannery O'Connor. I'm glad he did, so thanks, man. But as it stands, Wise Blood is currently one of my favourite reads of the year. It might not have been the first time I read it. I think on the video I said that I liked it but didn't quite love it. But thinking back on it, it's always sitting there at the back of my mind. It hasn't left. So I think that's the makings of a great book right there. So Wise Blood, Flannery O'Connor. The next one might just be my favourite out of these 10 books. It's Big Sur by Jack Kerouac. A very, I consider this to be sad. I mean, it's a stunning and vivid book, and the writing is still phenomenal, but I also consider this to be the best of the trilogy, and by that I mean the first one, which is On the Road, the second one, which is The Dharma Bums, and then the third one, which is Big Sur. So you got this trajectory, basically, of him starting out in that lifestyle, then he transitions to more of a Buddhism type lifestyle, and then Big Sur sees him at the height of his fame, and how he takes in that fame, and it just cripples him. And it ends with him at the cabin during one night, this almost hallucinatory night where he just caves in and just almost goes to madness. It's gripping stuff, very well written, and I absolutely loved it. Big Sur itself is obviously this part on the Californian coast, and it's absolutely beautiful. There's also a movie that came out back in 2013 or something like that. Very short film, it's like 70 minutes long, but it's also got a trailer that's one of the most beautiful trailers I've ever seen in my life. The way it's shot and the music, which is done by the Desner brothers of The National fame, I think it's a very underrated adaptation. So do check that out and let me know what you think of that, because I really enjoyed it. But as it stands, Big Sur is my favourite Jack Kerouac book. I've yet to read something by him that compares to it. I do like The Dharma Bums, and to be honest, I haven't actually finished On the Road. There was also the Letters from Cody, I think it is, or something along those lines. But I've read about 4 or 5 books by Kerouac, and he's yet to let me down, but nothing has been on par with Big Sur, specifically the final 30 pages of Big Sur, which I consider to be an absolute masterclass in writing. I mean, this final sentence is one of my all-time favorites. It's really beautiful. On soft spring nights, I'll stand in the yard under the stars. Something good will come out of all things yet, and it will be golden and eternal just like that. There's no need to say another word. That's always stayed with me. That's in my top 10 favorite. It's all finishing sentences, finishing paragraphs, finishing pages of any book that I've read, up there with Blood Meridian, I mean. So that's a very damn good book, Big Sur. Next up, we got J.G. Ballard with Crash. This really hideous book, and I mean that in the best sense. I mean, it's basically sex and violence just clashing head on, and a whole section that's dedicated to someone who's fascinated with Elizabeth Taylor. Just people who just get a hard on, just get sexually aroused by going to crash sites of cars. It's brutal stuff, but it should be brutal because it's J.G. Ballard. I mean, he's always been a very prescient writer, at least from what I've read. I really like his work. I've also read, Concrete Island, and that one there's a very short book as well. I think it's about 100 pages, and I was thinking of recommending it, but then I saw Crash sitting on my bookshelf, so I thought I'd give that a go. Honestly, my favourite book by him is still High Rise. That's a damn fine book, one of the best books I've read in the last 2-3 years. But as a postmodern book, as a book of it's almost a transgressive book, and a book that caused a lot of controversy when it came out. He's been a very controversial writer. It is a shocking piece of work. And I also say that during the time period that he released this, I can't remember if it was the 70s or the 80s that he just had this absolutely brilliant run of releases of books that included the Atrocity Exhibition, Crash, High Rise, and Concrete Island. 4 books like that in the span of like 6 years. That's brilliant. Those are some damn good books. So he's an all-time writer in my mind. I've yet to read Empire of the Sun, and I haven't read The Drowned World, but I have both of them. So I'm going to get around to those one day. But I'm sticking with this one here as my recommendation. So do read Crash. It's a pretty good work. Okay, we've got Slaughterhouse-Five by Kurt Vonnegut, the only Vonnegut that I have read. I've got Cat's Cradle, and I've got a couple of other ones, but I haven't got around to them. This seems to be a running theme here of this video, just having all these other books by these writers and not reading them, so I got to start buying books, But I picked this one here because of one specific scene, and it's a scene where it describes a plane picking up the bomb rising from the ground of the explosion coming back in, the bomb going up to the plane, and the plane going in reverse back to where it came from in London. It's described a lot more beautifully than that in the book, but that is the very different definition of anti-war right there. It really stuck with me. It's just wonderful imagery, and it's one of the few images in the book that feels totally prescient and beautifully realized. It's wonderful stuff. As for the rest of it, it's almost bonkers. I mean, this book here just zips by. It is fast-paced. It just keeps on changing. The tale of Billy Pilgrim, who gets unstuck in time. He keeps on going back and forth with his life. The years just change constantly. Sometimes you get a bit lost, but when you do find a good rhythm, you just go with this thing. I remember when back at my previous job, I used to walk home from work, and I'd walk home and I'd be reading. One week I just spent just reading this book walking home from work, and I walked into a tree. It just shows just how much I was invested in reading this thing. Beautiful, beautiful stuff. A lot of people recommend this, so there's not much more I can say about it. And there was a movie that came out as well back in the 80s or 70s or something like that, it was interesting. I quite enjoyed it, but yeah, so that's Slaughterhouse-Five. The next one might just be the shortest one in the whole collection, a novella by Roberto Bolaño, By Night in Chile. This one here has no breaks whatsoever. It is one long piece of ramblingness, and I was hooked from the very beginning. I was absolutely hooked from the very beginning. It's about a Chilean priest who's on his deathbed, just recounting his life, and he recounts it in a period of sequences. Gives you glimpses of the poet Pablo Neruda, the German writer Ernst Junger, and the General Pinochet, and all these characters are involved in sort of the political turmoil that's going on during that time in that country. There's a lot of politics that goes on in Roberto's books. He was very, very outspoken about that sort of thing. This is the first thing I read by him. I read a couple of his other novellas, but I haven't read the big boys. I haven't read The Savage Detectives or this beautiful cover of 2666. Well, absolutely praise to the heavens and back. Many people, even people I watch on YouTube, have read this and claimed it to be a brilliant piece of work. I mean, look at that cover. That's just like the very definition of maximalism right there. So, this was a literary event when it came out, and I do mean to get to it. And as you can see, I've got a bookmark in there. So I did get to page 57 of the beast. I don't know why I stopped, but yeah. I think I might even tackle this one next. I was going to read Blonde, but I have a hankering to read some Bolaño, But By Night in Chile is still a damn good place to start. This one was recommended to me by the woman in the bookstore who said, "Oh, do check this author out. He is something." So I'm forever grateful for her for introducing me to this Latin writer, just this person who can convey words, who's always wanted to be remembered as a poet first and an author second. And it still works to this day, being translated into English. So, there's always something coming out on the horizon. It's almost like the works of Yukio Mishima. There's like a couple of books of his that just got translated that I picked up not long ago. So it's the gift that keeps on giving. So that is By Night in Chile, Roberto Bolaño. The next one, I gotta have him in here because I think he's one of the greatest writers or greatest, one of the people who can put together a sentence the best, Vladimir Nabokov. I mean, the fact that this guy is a Russian-born and his English is like his second or third, even his third language, and he's able to put together sentences that just strip away everyone else's. He's better than 99.9% of of writers out there. His descriptive language is unparalleled. It's so damn good. Absolutely so damn good. I was thinking of Invitation to a Beheading, which might be my favorite Nabokov novel. I read Despair, Laughter in the Dark, but this one here is under 200 pages, so I have to recommend it. It is Peenin, the ultimate campus novel. People keep talking about a John Williams Stoner, which I've yet to read, but to my, even if I was to read it and love it, and I probably will love it because everyone else does, this to me is like the ultimate campus novel here. This to me is, it's a bit of a comedy, but almost a comedy in despair, because you feel sorry for this character. He's sort of like downbeat all the time, and he's always trying his best, but just shenanigans keep happening around him. He's it's truly something. I haven't read this in a long time, and I probably should get around to rereading it. But the way Nabokov writes will just, I truly do say this, and I recommend it to you because it draws you in and it pulls you along for the entire book, and you will not want to stop reading this book, even if you have to. It's wonderful stuff. He's a magician with words, a true magician of the English language. I can only just imagine how good his work is in the traditional native Russian. It's probably even better. Too bad I don't speak Russian, right? But that's Peenin for you, ultimate campus novel. And then the final one, I was on the fence about this one because technically I only like half of it, but the half of it that I love. That is Robert W. Chambers' The King in Yellow. I forgot about this book until recently because a fellow booktuber by the name of the Falcon, forgive me if I'm pronouncing that wrong because the wording's a bit different in his name. He did an Instagram post dedicated to this book here, and it pretty much resembles word for word what I think of this book. But the parts of it is a collection of short stories. But the parts of it that I do like, I really do love, and it is chilling stuff. It's an imaginative blend of horror. It is very strange, and it is the precursor to Lovecraft. So if you're interested in Lovecraft, then give this a read, because it is something here. This is the book that influenced a lot of horror writers of the 20th century. So he's almost like the OG, basically. And there's a lot of talks about Carcosa and the proverbial King in Yellow, and if all that sounds familiar, it's because it was featured quite heavily as a theme in the first season of True Detective, which I still think is one of the best seasons of television I've ever watched, the first season obviously. But this still probably ranks as, I'd probably classify it as, in the genre, as weird fiction. Just something just seems a bit off kilter about it. You're not quite sure what it is, and you can't put your finger on it. But I couldn't stop reading it, so I have to recommend it. But yeah, it was in the back of my bookshelf, just hidden there, and I had to scrounge around looking for it. So big thank you to the Falcon for reminding me of it. So I'm gonna post his booktube channel in the description box as well. So do check him out because he's got immaculate taste in books. He's very good. But that is The King in Yellow. The first half of this book, I think, is brilliant. It's the second half that I'm a bit on edge about. Although I probably should get around to rereading this because it is a short book, so it's been many years since I read it. And to cap it all off, I'm going to give an honourable mention. This is a book that I only just read in the last week, and that is Cynthia Ozick's The Shore. Now, the honourable mention is going to be for the first 10 pages of this, which is the short story of the titular Shore, which is about her and her niece and the young child she's carrying, walking to the concentration camp. I still think it's a brilliant short story. The novella that comes after it, titled Rosa, a little less so. I'm not that keen on it. And there's a good YouTube video from a guy by the name of Miles Estrada. It's more of a rant, if anything like that. He didn't like it as much as I did, obviously, but do check his video out because he talks about it as well in some good detail. And yeah, that first opening section is, to my mind, one of the best short stories I've read this year, up there with Flannery O'Connor. I mean, that's pretty much how good it is. It's a devastating look at the Holocaust, but it deserves an honorable mention. So there's it, for sure. So that is 10 books and one honorable mention that I think are worthy of your time, all under 200 pages, so it can be done. You can even read some of these in less than a day if you wanted to. So that is that, and thanks for watching. All the best. Cheers. Catch you next time. See ya.